Hello everybody, it's Mrs. Gaines and I'd like to read you chapter 5, please. I hope you're enjoying our story so far. Here we go then. They'd not been travelling long when a knock at the corridor window made Lily glance up from her penny dreadful. It was a thin fellow in his mirrored spectacles from the air station platform with a copy of the Daily Cog clasped under his arm. When he slid open the door and peered in, Lily gave a loud gasp. For the mirrors were not glasses, as she'd supposed, but lenses sewn into his raw red sockets of his eyes. The man had no eyeballs. He stared at the ticket in his black-gloved hand, then examined the brass numbers above the seats, his mirrors reflecting everything. "Excuse me, madam, miss, I appear to be allocated this cabin. May I come in?" Lily shook her head. But Madame Verdigris replied, "Certainly." "Thank you, much obliged." The thin man settled himself into the spare seat and leaned his walking cane against the wall. Lily noticed its silver skull handle. He took off his hat and gloves and placed them on his lap. "Sorry for the disturbance, ladies." "Please pay it no mind," Madame Verdigris returned to her embroidery, absently poking her needle through the eye of the petite cherub. The thin man unfolded his newspaper and smoothed the wrinkles from it. He opened it up to arm's length and began to read the inside pages. Lily could not stop staring at his face. Perhaps he'd been in an accident, for the rims of his eye sockets around the mirrors looked red with damage, and his cheeks were scarred with jagged marks. She decided he must be a hybrid, part human, part machine. She'd never seen one before. Until now, she'd never even sure they'd existed. Underneath her revulsion, she felt a little sorry for the man. It must be a difficult life to be singled out as different like that. She was probably looking too much. She turned her attention to the paper instead. It was the evening edition. Lily scanned the front page and gave a gasp. The lead article was about Papa's disappearance. She read the first 2 paragraphs. Daily Cog, Professor Hartman, missing, presumed dead. John Hartman, co-inventor of the modern mechanical and infamous recluse, was travelling on board the private airship Dragonfly yesterday when she disappeared. The ship failed to land at the stated destination of Brackenbridge Air Station and is thought to have combusted in the mid-air explosion. Authorities are currently searching the crash site in order to retrieve as much information as possible. Prominent in the field of mechanical design, Professor Hartman co-owned the country's largest mechanical manufacturing business with his friend and colleague, Professor Silverfish. But he fortified his share of the business and vanished from public life 7 years ago, when his wife was killed in a steam wagon crash. He leaves a surviving relative, a daughter, Lily, aged 13, whose current whereabouts are unknown. Our reporter, Anna Quinn, has attempted to contact the family. A lump welled in Lily's throat, and she stopped reading. It was all true then, written there in black and white. She glanced at the thin man, his head lolled against the headrest, his chin tipped back. Was he watching her, or was he sleeping? So hard to tell behind those lidless, mirrored eyes. She gave a cough. But he didn't move. Perhaps he really was asleep. He wasn't reading the newspaper anymore. It drooped now in his hands. She stuck her tongue out at him, and he flashed her a smile, sharp as sharks. "I must apologise again," he said, folding the Daily Cog and setting it aside. "I know how frustrating a stranger in one's cabin can be on a long journey." Lily gave a timid nod, which he seemed to take as an invitation to continue. "Odd they put us together when the Zepp's so empty. Must be a mechanical error." Madame Verdigris set aside her embroidery. "Was it the same mechanical porter who showed you aboard? I find these primitive mechanicals with their synthesized emotions most disagreeable, don't you? They make many clerical mistakes, and with the back talk they give you and all the winding, I'm often surprised they function at all. Quite true, madame. You've hit the nail squarely on the head. The thin man smiled, or should I say, got to the heart of the matter. Madame Verdigris gave her tingling cut-glass laugh. Madame Verdigris gave her tingling cut-glass laugh. Though Lily saw nothing funny about either of their remarks, it occurred to her that the thin man had twice addressed the housekeeper as madame, not madam, and she wondered how he knew the woman's preferred title. The thin man leaned forward, his silver eyes flashing in the light. Ladies, please allow me to introduce myself. My name is Mr. Roach. Madame Verdigris nodded to him. Bonsoir, Mr. Roach. I'm Madame Verdigris, and this is my charge, Miss Hartman. Ah, like the article? Mr. Roach asked, tapping the newspaper. Madame Verdigris sombrely inclined her head in an affirmative. Lily ground her teeth. Hadn't the housekeeper just told her not to let people know who she was? You look upset, young lady, Mr. Roach said, and no wonder. I'm fine, she said. I've something here might cheer you up. Mr. Roach put a hand in his pocket and he pulled out a paper bag, which he held out to Lily. She peered inside. Striped gooey sweets were fused to the paper. They must have been in his pocket for weeks. No, thank you, sir. Go on, they're humbugs. He thrust the paper bag at her, but she shook her head. What's the matter? You don't like humbugs? If I wasn't some mild-mannered fellow, I might be offended. Perhaps you think I'd better be off eating carrots, good for the old eyesight. He laughed and he tapped the centre of one mirrored eye with a finger. Lily felt a shiver rise up her back. No, she said, it's not that, only... She studied his unreadable expression. She didn't even know how to put it politely, but she needn't have worried. Madame Verdigris stepped in on her behalf. I'm afraid, sir, one rule of Miss Scrimshaw's Academy, where Miss Hartman is a pupil, is never... Sorry, one too many. Never accept street from strangers. Sorry, Lily added. Mr. Roach frowned, the silver orbs of his eyes narrowing. He clutched the paper bag in his gaunt hand. You could hardly call me a stranger, Miss Hartman. We've just introduced ourselves. I must say, I don't believe your rules apply in these circumstances. And one should never be without a humbug when one takes a long journey. I find they help with travel sickness on these computer zeps. Lily relented and took one, and Mr. Roach gave a small, victorious grin. The humbug tasted delicious, but after a while her eyelids drooped and she felt rather tired. She put her head against a frosty window, which thrummed and rattled with the Zeppelin's engines, and watched her breath cloud the glass. Before she drifted off, she heard Madame Verdigris say, I don't know why these Zeps are so loud always. Where is the refinement one gets with an old-fashioned horse and carriage or one's hot air balloon? Change is always monstrous at first, Mr. Roach replied, but people soon get used to it. You know I've the strongest feeling, Madame Hortense. There will be a lot of change in your life these coming months, for better or worse, depending on how you play your hand. I'll be watching closely to see how you handle things. Lily tried to fathom out the meaning of the words, but she found them slippery and ungraspable as they swam away from her as like a shoal of fish, pulling her along in a fog of sleep. Oh dear, sorry. When she came to, the Zepp was approaching the local air station, and Mr. Roach was gone. She suddenly remembered He'd been far too familiar with Madame, his last word tinged with a threat of some kind. "What happened to the fellow sitting opposite?" Lily asked, stifling a yawn. "He left a few minutes ago to prepare for landing," Madame said. "He had an urgent appointment and wanted to disembark first." "But how did he know your first name?" "Pardon?" Madame seemed somewhat flustered. She tucked her needle into the edge of her embroidery. Lily noticed she'd filled in the cherub's eye with silver circles of thread. "I heard him use your first name," Lily repeated, "and he knew you were called Madame before you even gave your title." "What an odd thing to say," the housekeeper let out a peal of laughter. "You must have dreamt it." She gathered her spools of thread and she tucked them into a bag next to her needlework. "You were asleep for so long, Lily. In fact, you've loosed your hair. Perhaps you'd better tidy yourself before we arrive." Lily was tempted to pursue the subject further, but the airship had begun its descent towards the landing site, and soon the familiar shabby sign of Brackenbridge Air Station appeared, lighting up the cabin. She struggled into her coat and scarf, and a few minutes later they disembarked onto the tiny local platform. A cold wind buffeted them as they descended to the gangplank and took the wooden steps towards ground level. Papa's mechanical driver, Captain Springer, was waiting to collect them at the entrance to the station, standing beside their steam wagon. Lily recognised him at once from his bow legs and his bent stance. As soon as Madame Verdigris had wound him up, he hobbled over and gave Lily a creaky hug. "By all the ticks," he cried, "it's good to see you, Lily." Then he huffed and he puffed on his wooden legs, his cogs clicking as he loaded her case into the cab and helped Madame to her seat. Climbing in after them, Lily glanced back at the other departing passengers, all wrapped up against the cold. She searched among the faces for Mr. Roach, but she couldn't find him anywhere. He seemed to have melted into the night. The journey to the house took less than half an hour, but Lily stayed awake the whole time, thinking about the silver-eyed man and how he connected to Madame. Captain Springer pulled the steam wagon onto the drive of Brackenbridge Manor, and Lily and Madame stepped down onto the frosty path. As they walked towards the door, Lily glanced through the black skeletal trees of the garden, their branches like cracks in the sky, up to Papa's study window, where the lamp once burned late into the night while he worked on his projects. She half expected to see the flicker of it now, but there was nothing. The window stayed dark. An icy draught whisked across the grounds, throwing up the last few fallen leaves, and a flood of grief made Lily swallow hard. Batting away the dust of the cold sting, she followed Madame and Captain Springer towards the low-lit porch. Madame took out the ring of keys, unlocked the front door, and ushered Lily inside. She nodded at Captain Springer to indicate he should stow the case in the vestibule beside the rack of Papa's old walking shoes. To see them made Lily's heart leap for a second. Their folded leather shapes and straggly laces laid out beneath everyday coat on its hook. It was almost as if he'd come in and left them there. But no, he wouldn't have taken his flying jacket and his boots if he and Mulligan had gone off in Dragonfly. These were just the things he left behind, the remnants of him. Her heart cracked some more as she realised he was truly gone, and the thought cut deep. She took a breath and stepped through the glass door, the vestibule in the ground hall. She was still half expecting the old cosy warmth of the house to greet her, but if anything, it felt colder and darker in here than outside. At the foot of the stairs, Mrs. Rust, the mechanical cook, awaited them. She must have stood there for the whole day because she'd wound down and was frozen in an expectant pose, one hand resting on the curved banister. Lily walked towards her. Apart from Malkin, Mrs. Rust had always been her favourite among Papa's mechanicals. But since Lily had her last, her old metal face had become more worn. Scores of worry lines crossed her rusty forehead, and her nose bloomed with the new chips of paint. Madame Verdigris sent Captain Springer jittering across the tiled hall and off along the darkened servants' corridor. Then she examined Mrs. Rust. "Mon Dieu," she tutted. "These old models. It stopped again." She strode around behind the mechanical woman, pulling out her ring of keys once more. She searched through Mrs. Rust's unique winder and inserted it into the mechanical's neck, turning it viciously until Lily heard the springs inside of the Iron Lady begin to creak and groan. When Madame finished the windings, she stepped back and waited. Mrs. Rust's eyes sprung open. Her expression looked glazed for a moment, the way mechanicals' faces always did when you were with them. But she blinked, caught sight of Lily, and let out a joyful cry. "Cogs and chronometers! My tiger lil's back!" Mrs. Rust scooped Lily into her arms, sweeping her feet off the floor. "How I've missed you, dear heart." "I've missed you too, Rusty." Lily kissed the mechanical's dented metal cheek, which was rouged with paint and smelled slightly of lavender oil. Mrs. Rust put her down and took a good look at her. Then her face became serious, and she let out a long, wheezing sigh. "Oh, Lily," she said, "I'm so sorry about your father. Poor John. By all that ticks, I don't know what we'll do without him." Hearing Mrs. Rust say Papa's name like that made Lily's heart flutter. "Me neither," she said wearily, and she leaned up to kiss her on the nose. Madame Verdigris gave a discreet cough. How have things been getting on here today, miss? I trust you took care of everything before you wound down for the night." "Yes, ma'am. I didn't realise I'd run out of clicks before you arrived, but you took so long." "Malheureusement, the Zeppelin was delayed," Madame said. "Foul weather, storm clouds on the line." "Shame," Mrs. Rush ruffled Lily's hair with a soft leathery hand. "I've made up young Lily's room, like you asked. Though I could have done with a little help." The mechanical cook gave the housekeeper a dark stare, but Madame didn't notice because she turned to Lily. "Mrs. Rust will help you settle in," she said. "Nay," quietly, "you'll find things run differently around here with me at the helm. I'll accept none of the tearaway behaviour your father saw fit to tolerate, especially not in the Joint Ranger." Madame tipped her head back to stare down her nose at Lily. "I shall want to see you in the drawing room straight after breakfast, when we should discuss matters indignantly." She was too wrung out by the emotion of the day to find a suitable response. "Bon," the housekeeper said. "Then I shall retire to bed. It's been a long trip." She took the oil lamp from the hall table and she swept off to the stairs, leaving Lily and Mrs. Rust alone in the glow of the single candle. Mrs. Rust picked it up and she ushered Lily upstairs too. As they reached the first floor landing, Lily heard Madame shut the door of the master bedroom and saw the glint of her lantern through the gap of the door beneath the gap of the door. "But that's Papa's room," she cried out. "Smokestacks and sprockets," Mrs. Rust whispered. "Not anymore." Soon as she heard he was gone this morning, Madame moved his things into the servants' box room at the back and installed herself there before she came to get you. She even had Mr. Wingnut set your mamma's old dressing table for her. Lily felt that already had been gone 7 years, and Papa only a day, but already Madame was acting like she was the lady of the manor. Mrs. Rust opened the door to Lily's own room. At least in here, she was relieved to find everything was just as she'd left it. Her books still piled on their shelves, and her notes and her drawings pinned to the walls in fat bunches, hiding the yellow wallpaper. She emptied the suitcase into the wardrobe, not bothering to unfold anything. While Mrs. Rust busied herself, filling in the grate with kindling, her arms rattling like bicycle chains. "Madame stopped me setting fires this week while Papa had been away," she said. "But now you're home, we'll soon have things running the way they're meant to be. I'll make it cosy in no time, don't you worry." The old mechanical laid the last of the logs atop the kindling. "Oh, and you might be needing an extra layer. It's got pretty cold here these winter nights. Did I?" She shook it over her bed, filling the room with blizzard dust. "Clockwork and..." Mrs. Rust let out a foghorn sneeze. "Cowwheels!" "Bless you," Lily said. "Thank you, my tiger." Mechanical took an old scrap of sacking from her pocket and she blew her nose into it. "A touch of pneumonia. Can I give you a piece of advice? Don't tell Madame anything you don't have to. The past week, while your father's been on his trip, she's been through his office with a fine-tooth comb. How dare she? What on earth is she looking for? Mrs. Rusk threw her arms in the air. Crank shafts and carburetors, I wish I knew. Could be anything. She's a devious one, her. Got all kinds of rules turning in her head, and she was lording it up when we heard the news this morning. Put herself in charge naturally. Mrs. Rusk held the candle to the kindling and fanned the flames with her apron. Lily sat on the bed, watching her. We should send windscreen wipers, the old mechanical muttered. At last, when the fire is caught, you mustn't mind my blather. It's only with the old fuss budget. When you come down in the morning, I will make you a nice tea cake with jam, just as you like it, and we can have a proper gossip. Thank you, Rusty. Sorry we woke you so late. I hope you sleep well. You too, my tiger Bill, you too. Mrs. Rusk placed the candle by the bedside and crept out. Lily pulled the blanket over her knees and sat listening to the old mechanical's clicking joints as she walked along the passage. Later, changing into a nightdress, Lily touched the long white scar on her chest, a cut made by a shard of windscreen glass during the accident. The mark had faded over the years, like the memory of Mama, but she still felt this sharp throb sometimes, and now, with Papa gone too, those memories she tried so hard to forget were once again welling up inside, gnawing at her empty belly. She brushed them away as she pondered Mrs. Rusk's parting words. What was Madame after in Papa's things? And what could she do if thoughts were not at all pleasant? As she was too hungry and exhausted to consider them. She hadn't eaten a thing since breakfast. Strange to think that the afternoon she'd still be at school. She glanced at her bedside clock. 1:30. Beneath the tiny ivory inlaid sheep jumped over a stile. Papa had designed it for her, and she'd found herself counting the creatures now, trying to ignore the whir of her mind as she closed her eyes and drifted off into the uneasy sleep full of the silver-eyed men and their skull-topped canes. Okay, well, there we are. That's chapter 5. What is that housekeeper up to? Does she know this strange man that was on the train? Are Lily's suspicions correct? Okay, let's find out when you listen to chapter 6. Okay, thank you for listening. Afternoon, everybody. It's Mrs. Gaines here. I'd like to read you chapter 8. That afternoon in the village, everything was quiet. Snow had been falling all day, and the thick drifts of it muffled the streets. Robert only had one visitor at Tamson's, Mrs. Chivers, an old woman from the village with selective deafness, who traipsed through the knee-deep powder in her winter woolens, carrying her mechanical canary and its tiny, unique winding key. It had stopped working and no longer chirped. Robert examined it, and she pouted and she scrunched up her wrinkled face like a paper bag when he explained that it would be a couple of days before he or his dad could make the repairs, because parts were not arriving owing to the weather. He put himself in the word, got on with the accounts, adding the lines of the number it required every ounce of concentration. And the hours passed in a sea of ticks until before he knew it, the November light was fading. When the rows of clocks in the cases chimed out 4, he closed the ledger and he reached out for the oil lamp at the edge of the counter. Removing the glass chimney, he struck a match and held it to the wick, then replaced the glass and watched the flames amber tones fill the room, scattering shadows between clock faces. A movement caught his eye. A thin, odd-looking man, his eyes hidden by the brim of his stovepipe hat, stood silhouetted in the doorway. The chime of the clocks must have masked his entrance, for Robert had not heard the bell and could have sworn the fellow hadn't been there a moment before. The thin man thrust his lacquered cane into the umbrella stand and let go of its silver skull handle. Outside the shop, the large mutton chop gent from the morning before limped into view. Robert watched him stop and lean his wide wool-coated back against the etched arse. He lit a fat cigar and gazed off down the street. The thin man was hunched forward, examining the clocks in the shop's display cabinet. He cleared his throat, took off his gloves, and with their fingertips brushed the melting snow from the front of his long coat. Good evening, Master Townsend. Quite the place you have here. We're proud of it, sir. Indeed, should be. The man tipped back his stovepipe hat, and the shadows faded from his face. My name is Mr. Roach. Robert gave a gasp, for his eyes were mirrored, just like the mutton chop man's. Mr. Roach laughed. What's wrong, boy? Have you never seen a hybrid before? No, I mean, your colleague outside. Robert shook his head and involuntarily put his hand up to touch his own cheek. What's happened to you? Nosy, aren't you? Mr. Roach's lidless eyes didn't blink. The silver lenses trapped the room in their surface. Unflinching, my colleague and I were blinded in combat. Our master prepared us. Oh! Robert felt hairs rise on the back of his neck. Mr. Roach leered at him. If you think we look bad, he's a comment. Why? What happened to him? Let's just say he lost his head. Robert gulped, and Mr. Roach laughed. Of course, we wouldn't even be fighting wars if mechs could do their jobs, but they're far too stupid. Robert's blood boiled at still eye. He knew mechs couldn't kill humans. It had nothing to do with them being stupid. And now I must speak with your master, the clockmaker, Mr. Roach was saying. Robert realised his mouth had fallen open and snapped it shut. I'm afraid Dar's busy. Were you looking for something in particular? He had a horrible notion he knew exactly what the man was nosing for. So the clockmaker, is your father? Mr. Roach's mirrored eyes gleamed. Surely you have some idea of our foxing problem. He gestured with his black gloves, indicating the mutton chop fellow outside. You met my colleague, Mr. Mould, on the street yesterday morning, and you were kind enough to give him some information about the mechanical we're looking for. Only your information proved to be false. Now we're wondering if you know something more. Are you from the police? Exactly so, boy. Mr. Roach gave a parrying smile. His eyes remained a very secret police. Mr. Mould thinks you might be able to assist us further in our inquiries if we take you in for interrogation. Robert swallowed a prickly dryness at the back of his throat. I'm afraid I can't help you. I told your colleague everything I saw. Perhaps you did, or perhaps you didn't. The corners of Mr. Roach's lips twisted into the slightest of smirks. We might never know unless we apply a little pressure. He picked up Mr. Chivers' mechanical canary from the counter and tapped its face with his long bony finger. Mr. Mould has a most singular way of dealing with those who refuse to cooperate with our inquiries. He has methods of making them sing. Mr. Roach pushed the face of the canary to the sharp corner of the display table. Crack went the clockwork canary, and Mr. Roach pushed harder until the thing's face dented into an irreparable splintered mess. Then he placed the broken mechanical on the counter in front of Robert. Well, I must be going, Master Townsend. No doubt we will see each other again before long. Mr. Roach pulled his cane from the umbrella stand, and his eyes flashed white as he opened the door. The bell jingled cheerfully as he left. Robert let out a sigh of relief. For as soon as he'd gone, he felt as if the air turned to the shop. He picked up the broken clockwork bird and watched as the pair crunched away through the drifts and disappeared at the dark end of the street. Diaz was incensed when he found the destroyed mechanical. He gave another long lecture on caring for customers' property until Robert mumbled an excuse and said that he'd dropped the thing. He didn't want to worry Dar unduly, and he was afraid if he told the truth, Diaz might get rid of the neck fox before they even got it working again. For the rest of the afternoon, he pretended nothing out of the ordinary had happened. Besides, Roach and Mould could still be watching the shop. Quietly, he got on with his work, tidying up the mess, but the whole time he was thinking about the mechanical fox. It must have been truly valuable if those men were making such violent threats to get hold of it. When he finally finished his chores, he could barely contain his sense of inquisitive excitement as he took the lamp back to the workshop to check on whether the mechanical had woken. It lay in exactly the same spot as last night, frozen on one kit, in the centre of the workbench. Robert wound it once more with the key and waited, but again nothing happened. He peered closely at the keyhole on the fox's neck, and he saw straight away what the problem was. The mechanism inside was minutely misangled. He took down a screwdriver from his collection and, putting it into the keyhole, pushed until he felt the click of the mechanism slotting into place. Then he replaced the key, wound the mechanical yet again, and waited. After a while, there was a low sound and a series of clicks grated around Fox's eyes. The quadruped began to judder. A shiver ran along its spine, and its body began to slowly shake and tick. Soon the ticking grew louder and more regular. Tick, 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 tick. And with a crackling creak, the fox awoke, its entire frame stiffening into an alert response. Robert stepped back as its face bristled and blinked, and it shook the stillness from the rest of its body. Its eyes darted round the room when he saw him. It arched its back and let out a low, warning growl, a deep mechanical sound which made his knees quake. Robert flashed the fox a grin, but it glared back at him, unblinking. Then it gnawed angrily at its repaired leg and gave out a yelp of pain. I know it hurts, Robert said. It will take time to feel better. A few days while we get used to the new parts. The mechanical growled and bared its its white teeth at him. Of course it hurts, you insolent meat puppet. It hurts like a steel tooth ratchet. Claw. Its glassy black eyes seemed to stare right through him. Who are you? It demanded. What do you want? Where the crank did you find me? Don't be scared, Robert told him. I only want to help. He held out his empire until the growl deepened. Shh, Robert said as he reached out to the mechanical. Lightning fast, the fox snapped at his fingers. Robert stepped back, tripped over the battered trunk, and landed seat first on the floor, banging his head on the leg of the workbench. There was a long silence, during which he took off his cap and rubbed his head. He stared sheepishly at the mech. You could have killed me with those sharp teeth, you know. I did warn you, monkey boy. Now, if you don't tell me who you are in the next tick-tocking minute, I shall bite you for real. I thought you couldn't hurt humans. In your case, I think I might be able to make an exception. You're bluffing. Try me, find out. Robert straightened his jacket. No thanks, he said. I don't want any more trouble. My name is Robert Townsend. Then this is the clockmaker's shop, the fox asked. And you are the clockmaker? He gave Robert a disapproving stare. You look far too stringy to be a clockmaker. I'm his apprentice. Oh, I see. I suppose you would be. You're only a young pup after all, and a mangy-looking one at that. Who are you calling mangy? Robert said. You're the one who looks like you've been dragged through a hedge backwards. I'm on a mission, the fox snapped. There are those who wish me harm, and they're still sniffing about, the meatheads who were chasing me. I don't know, Robert said. I caught a couple of them skulking round the lanes yesterday morning, the fat silver-eyed one with the ginger mutton chops, and some others who ought to be thanking me. I sent them off in the wrong direction when their dog was on your tail. Then, today, one came in the shop to talk to me, another mirror-eyed man, thin, with a scarred face. Mr. Roach, he said his name was, very creepy. He paused to breathe. What do they want with you anyway? Talk a lot, don't you? The fox said. Bit of a bargain blabbermouth. Ask lots of questions. Sometimes, Robert mumbled. The fox ignored him and lapsed into silent contemplation. At last, it spoke. You're not going to tell anyone about me, are you? About me? No. Then I apologise. I'm usually better mannered, but this injury gives me the jitters. My name is Malkin, by the way. Pleased to make your acquaintance, Malkin, Robert said. And I yours. Malkin gave a slight nod of his head, which Robert assumed was meant to stand for a bow, and winced. Most people don't believe mechanicals feel pain, he said. But you do, don't you? Robert asked. Of the more extreme kind, yes. The fox gnawed at his injury once more. My leg ached like it's been put through a bandsaw, and that's a new sensation for me. We fixed it for you, my dad and I. Though it'll take some time before it's fully healed. Thank you, but it's put me in an awkward situation. You see, I've a message to deliver, and time is ticking by. The fox felt with his nose around the ruff of his neck and looked up sharply. Wait! What the talk? Where's my letter? Oh, crikey, Robert muttered. I forgot. He searched round the workbench, under the tools and screwdrivers, until he found the envelope and the pouch. I can put it back, but I wouldn't walk anywhere for a few days, if I were you. Maybe I could take this letter, if you like. Malkin considered this. No, I don't think so, he said huffily. I promised to deliver it myself. But perhaps you could bring Lily here from Brackenbridge Manor. It must be of utmost importance, Robert shrugged. I don't know. That's a long way to walk, and it's already dark. I don't want to risk it night in case those men see me. Those men are still there. But I can go tomorrow, if you like. After I finish my chores. Malkin sniffed. I suppose that's acceptable, he said. I only hope it's not too late. Then he thought of something else. But perhaps you can give Lily the message when you fetch her. You'll tell her the secret's in the safe. He looked confused. Wait, is it the secret's safe or the secret's in the safe? Well, which? Robert asked. Malkin's ears drooped, and a look of worry crossed his face. Do you know, he said, with all that's happened, I'm not entirely sure. Okay, so I think that is the end of that. Well, it's beginning to get exciting now, isn't it? I wonder what's going to happen. Is there something